He said, "My name is Leichtag." And that's how he said it, Lee Leichtag. I never dreamt at that moment that he would become one of the best friends in my life.
Well, my grandfather always had the attitude of, if you can't get in the front door, you go around and you go in the back door.
Tony made a wonderful impression. When she walked into a room, there was a lot of energy.
I think they had the most wonderful relationship, and it was always fun to be with them.
He talked often about how he related to his wealth, how privileged he felt to have it, that it really wasn't his.
When I first came to work for him, he did say, "We start from excellence and we get better."
Lee did not dwell upon things that happened in the past and when he was very, very young. The only thing he would relate to would always be in some sort of a facetious fashion. He would say something like that he earned more in 1 month than his father did in a year. He was trying to be funny, but in trying to be humorous, he brought out the fact that his parents did not do that well, and they had tough times going way, way back.
He'd always shared with me the story of his family. They were extremely poor, and they shared bathwater. So my grandfather's oldest sister went first, and then his middle sister, and then my grandfather always went last. And he knows what it's like to need.
One of the things that he was very proud of is that he never finished high school, or he finished high school but no more, and yet he was such a success. And he used to tell me, Bob, it's very easy for a person to be very successful if he has a lot of initials behind his name. But if you don't have any initials, it's twice as hard to become a success.
Tony was extremely, she came out of a very, very challenging environment, raised by her mother with her younger brother.
We were very, very, very poor. We had no assets at all. And it was day to day for many, many years.
Later in life, when my grandfather was in a position to give and he saw people in need, I think he had a compassion for that, and that's always something that he wanted to do.
There was instilled in him early a very giving attitude and a compassion that is rare.
One passion was, he was the ultimate salesman. Now, I remember he had these one-liners that they used to say, and there's one that I remember says, Bob, he says, when two people are talking, one is selling, So that's the ultimate salesman.
Lee started as a manufacturer's rep, and he was selling, believe it or not, foodstuffs to the military. From there, he got involved with selling vitamins.
In 1991, the Leichtags sold their business, MD Pharmaceuticals Inc., a California corporation. And the corporation had been the first generic manufacturer of Ritalin, methylphenidate. And so the market was very big. And the drug was an immediate success. They sold the business in 1991 to a British conglomerate by the name of Mediva, and as part of their effort to shelter some of the gain from that transaction, they created a foundation immediately after the closing in July of 1991 with a contribution of about $9 million. The foundation was not highly evolved as a family-owned and operated foundation. In fact, to say that it was family-owned and operated would probably be a slight understatement. When matters would come up before the board for approval, I would call the question, and Lee would say, all those in favor say aye, all those opposed say I quit. And that's how decisions essentially were made. So if asked where his strategic plan was, he'd point to his head. If asked where his budget was, he'd point to his wallet.
Lee and Tony seem to have a particular interest in the very young and the very old, so both ends of the life cycle. And it's interesting how in the Torah, among the 2 or 3 groups that are supposed to be protected at all junctures are the very old and the very young. So Lee had definitely a sensitivity to people who didn't have the physical strength to take care of some of their needs. And I know he just loved feeling that the seniors at Seacrest were getting not just appropriate care, but caring care.
He not only gave to Seacrest, of course, and to hospitals, of course, but to schools and universities.
Almost every grant that we made was important in the sense that he was very active in trying to understand these things, actively engaged with the organizations that we do support.
I always felt that Tony was the backbone of Lee's personality, that he was his own person, certainly, but Tony rarely would hesitate to speak up, either at meetings with or without Lee.
Tony was a terrific wife to begin with. She was very understanding, and when I first met them, she was also very helpful in the business. Tony used to write the checks, pay the bills, get involved with the correspondence.
She was quiet, but if you asked her opinion, she always had a very strong opinion. And I think that my grandfather respected her more than anyone, and he'd always go to her for advice. Even though he always appeared to be such a strong man that knew so much about so many things.
She was well liked in the community. They both were. They did some wonderful things in their later years, and I was proud of that.
Tony was always such an outstanding dresser. She always dressed like a woman 30 or more years younger than she was. I stopped wearing heels long before she did. And I would worry, she would fall, she would trip, this or that. No, she did great. With her painted toenails, and her hair was always exquisitely done.
Tony would leave presents every Friday morning on our desk. Sometimes they would be wrapped and sometimes they would just be sitting there. And they would be girly presents like jewelry, makeup or perfume, things that she liked, so she knew that we would like them.
They loved their social life. It was who they were. They had a network of friends they enjoyed being with. They very much identified those friends around a place. They called it community, and the community, traveled with them.
I first met Jolie, and I think I was expecting someone who was more outgoing. They told me how polished she was as a person and how well she handled business situations, and I think I expected someone who would walk right up to me and shake my hand in a very forceful way, and I was totally enchanted by the quietness and gentleness of her nature and her personality. When I was part of the dedication of the school that now bears her name in San Marcos, I had the strongest sense of her complete delight with that situation. I just really felt that she would have rejoiced in knowing that she was able to contribute to the flourishing of that institution. She had a very strong spiritual sense, and I think many people feel that in a way children are more spiritually pure or perhaps closer to God or less tainted. And maybe that also was a part of her wanting to give to children, was she wanted to keep them hopeful and unscathed by life so that they could retain some of that pure joy and feeling of confidence.
My mom was amazing. She really deeply cared about each person that she came across. She always turned lemons into lemonade. If I ever had something negative to say, she'd say, "Heather, don't put that out there."
Jolie had had several rounds of chemotherapy, and the time was now to realize that her time was finite, that the end was near. And I kind of shared this with Lee, not so abruptly, but sort of indirectly, that you need to be prepared for this, He didn't have a clue. And it struck me so funny because she had seen numerous oncologists and surgeons and so forth. Somebody must have told him what the score is on Jolie. And I think they all did, but he blocked it out. So this time when I was really this serious, I actually sat him down, and I had a three-way conversation, him, myself, and the latest oncologist he saw. And the oncologist told Lee, this is the score, it'll be 2 months or less, And then he totally lost it. He was like a whimpering child, at that point, and I realized he didn't have a clue until that moment, And of course that was very hard for him to accept.
What he went through when Jolie was sick was very sad. He almost didn't want to accept it. He couldn't accept it at first. And they tried every possible way to, that's when they went to the City of Hope. They tried several doctors, and that was a very difficult time.
The naming of the Jolie Ann Leichtag Elementary School in San Marcos was without question the most meaningful grant to both he and Tony personally. It came at a very raw, difficult moment in their life. It was a bittersweet idea, but the idea of being able to remember their daughter in this way and have a community honor their daughter in this way it was gratifying that was able to occur.
I miss her a lot. I miss her a lot.
There is a culture of Jewish values that many people have a strong grounding in, and I feel that both Tony and Lee had that grounding, and it must have come from their parents.
When Lee and Tony got involved with giving specifically to Jewish organizations, they were very, very pleased that if they could do something that would benefit future generations, which is one of the reasons they contributed to educational institutions, because they thought that way if you taught younger people the ethics of the religion, the younger people would then be able to utilize the ethics and the behavior over a period of their lives, and in so doing affect others. They wanted the continuity of the religion to be relevant, and that was, in fact, that's even on our mission statement.
That was his big passion, to take care of people, Jewish people who didn't have the fortune he had.
Israel held a place in their heart from the point of view it was the sole place of refuge for Jews anywhere else, because they saw what happened during World War II, where Jews had no place to go when they left Eastern or Western Europe.
On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, every year that I can remember, Lee and Tony went to Seacrest for services. I think it was more important for them, for their own gratification and beliefs, to attend a service where there wasn't a lot of people.
I think having an adult bat mitzvah for Jolie gave her a way to put her arms around wanting to feel connected to Judaism. They both understood what is the foundational Jewish value of the dignity of every human being. They wanted to contribute to people's sense of self-worth.
Lee gave me advice constantly. We had a really terrific relationship. I would see him regularly. We would eat lunch often. He would always order lunch and we'd split it. I never looked at a menu. It didn't matter. I would eat whatever he felt like eating on a particular day, and that's how things worked. But it was a relationship in which I often received paternalistic advice around a host of things, from my health to the way I ran my business. He would get into some details. He would question my writing style. He would. There wasn't anything that was really off base, is what I would say.
He said, and he was really in no position to say this, he said, keep your left arm stiff and don't move the upper part of your body as much as you're doing on the backswing. And I tried to remember that advice, but frankly, it didn't do any good.
He told me that he wanted to get, during one particular job, he couldn't get in, and so he sent them a door and said that he'd knock down this door to get a job there. And he'd always had these funny stories about his different sales jobs and little funny things that he did to stand out and be different, and I think that's why he was so successful. I think thousands of lives have been impacted by what my grandparents have done. There's just been so many projects. They always had a project going, and when one project was finished, they started another one. If there was a need for it, my grandparents were always game for helping out who needed the help.
From Wheatley, his beginnings, into how his life ended, all that he accomplished, and I think that he answered his boyhood wish that he would be successful, and he was.
Very unique. Truly an unusual person. I will never forget him. Probably one of the most formative influences of people, influential people on me that I've come across. My father, my law partner for 30 years, and Lee.
They truly felt they had lucked out in life. I mean, they were the American dream.